Good afternoon, everyone. This is Shannon Scott, your taphophile with the most in stories adventure out here in Savannah, Georgia. Hanging out beneath the live oaks, sprawling above in the drapery of the Spanish moss. And I'm not in Bonaventure today or Laurel Grove Cemetery, but another one that's a goodie. It's called Hillcrest Abbey East from the early part of the 20th century. And it's neighboring to the Catholic Cemetery of Savannah, Georgia of 1853. So it's kind of a new kid on the block historically, but it's such a precious place and just beautiful granite and marble headstones out here. Not quite the sculptural level you find in some of the other cemeteries aforementioned, but there is one unique grave here I'm so excited to share with you. And it's a twofold thing. There's a memorial marker, which was placed here in the late 50s, early 60s. And even now in modern cemeteries, you don't find too many historical markers in active cemeteries. Like old ones, not uncommon perhaps, but like Colonial Park has plenty downtown. But here, not so much in these active cemeteries. But let me introduce you to the youngest soldier of the Confederacy. And this is the memorial marker placed by the developer of the cemetery. We'll talk about him in a minute, but Whitemarsh H. MacFeeley, resting in this garden, a lovely phrase. And I kind of call him the boy with 5 birthdates and an errored headstone or errored death certificate. A part of discovering who this kid was is that the records are extremely mixed, and he may have had the best memory of his own age when he entered the war late in 1864, about 12 years of age. But what makes this marker great, and incidentally, he's buried, about 60 feet that direction. We'll soon see that. But beyond the grave in the distance there is a marble columbarium mausoleum type building of probably the 1950s, past or just in front of it are actually Civil War earthen mound works left over from 1861, 1862 that were built around the city as a part of a structure called Fort Brown. And I've not been able to find too much on Fort Brown itself, so I think maybe the earthworks generally described it. In fact, what's really interesting is that behind the mausoleum in the distance is the Savannah Golf Course, and a part of the golf course landscape itself with the greens and the sand traps, in particular one middle tee, are actually a part of the Civil War earthen mounds themselves. So you can never escape history, even when you're playing a game of golf in Savannah. And some say George Washington played that course when he was here in 1790, but I don't know, that's maybe just a nice golf rumor. But, let's travel a little over here to MacFeeley's grave momentarily so you guys can lay eyes on it. Varying records, the death certificate shows he was born 1863. Well, you can't enter the war as a drummer boy at age 1, so that's just not correct, and may have been misstated by a relative when he died, or the coroner misheard it. But MacFeeley here, the main headstone, and then as we swing around here, kind of respectfully as we go, we see the actual headstone of Whitemarsh H. MacFeeley. Died April 9th, 1920, age 65, youngest soldier of the Confederacy. Although various records and statements misstate this, probably because he used his mother's name of Seabrook, which is an old South Carolina, Georgia name. When he entered the war, he was born in South Carolina, I believe Sumter, but that could be off. But nonetheless, he entered as a drummer boy near the end of the war. He called himself 11 or 12 years of age, and we find birth dates that range around 1852, 1853, 1855. But if he's calling himself about 12 years of age, that's probably true. So we'll just say 1852 is probably accurate. I'll show you the death certificate here real quick. It says born October 11th, 1863. So we know that's an impossibility. He died here in Savannah. But I'd like to read you this article found by a researcher out there who really did the legwork, and we can't thank them enough. We'll read this this was published in a Sumter, South Carolina newspaper called the Sumter Daily in July of 1966. Savannah may be the final resting place of the Confederacy's youngest soldier. Colonel Clayton B. Morgan, retired family service director of Savannah Cemetery, is convinced that Whitemarsh H. MacFeeley was the youngest man to join the South's fighting force in the Civil War. Morgan has ordered a bronze plaque citing MacFeeley as such to be erected in the Hillcrest Abbey Memorial Park near the soldier's grave. Records show that MacFeeley enlisted at the age of 11 years, 9 months as a drummer boy in the 21st South Carolina Volunteers, Colonel Graham Haygood's Brigade, Hoke's Division, in mid-July of 1864. The claim that he was the Confederacy's youngest soldier was first made by a former member of Haygood's Brigade in 1900 to a reporter for the Charleston, South Carolina News and Courier. An article in the newspaper quoted MacFeeley as saying, "I enlisted at the age of nearly 12, and I did the work of a drummer boy until ordered to Wilmington, North Carolina, when I became an orderly around brigade headquarters. At the time, I was large for my age and was told that I looked 14 years old. Okay, you're in, kid. At any rate, I had no difficulty in giving satisfaction to my commanding officer and was well treated by the soldiers generally. I trudged many weary miles in the heat and shows of Virginia during the summer and winter months I served there. I had the honor of shaking hands with General Beauregard and Lee while around Petersburg. General Haygood introduced me to them, and their kindly, smiling countenances expressed amusement, though also encouragement at beholding so youthful a soldier." After the war, MacFeeley traveled extensively as a crew member of vessels sailing to European ports. He later worked for newspapers in Columbia, Charlotte, Baltimore, and New York before moving to Savannah in 1907. He served as a printer and proofreader for the Savannah Morning News and Evening Press and lived here until his death in 1925. MacFeeley was born October 11, 1852 in Charleston. So the headstone contradicts the record because according to the headstone anyway, he died 1920, which corresponds with the death certificate as well. So we're not sure how that flub exactly happened, but nonetheless, he was definitely not born in 1863. But I think it's fascinating that, you know, a young kid like that had the gusto and the gumption. But, you know, they weren't, let's say, caught up with video games and all of the distractions where they wanted to really go out there and prove themselves and their worth. And that's really what they did for both the North and the South. Yeah, they joined the other men, because really by the time you were 14, you know, you had to be married and have your own property or whatever it was, right? So different time. And, you know, I think there's probably not something to sneer at there. But MacFeeley's adventures certainly have made our lives richer. And just think about that. That's one story, one person, one grave among thousands and thousands in the world. And each headstone to me is like a novel. It is a research project. It is a way of broadening the scope of your own human understanding of the human experience. And I don't know if MacFeeley necessarily ever consciously thought that his own life would inspire a YouTube video or a Facebook Live video, but you know, here we are talking about him, and his spirit lives on in that sense, and the sense of sacrifice as well. And boy, I always, you know, at the end of something like this, I just really feel uplifted and inspired. And it seems like he did live a really rich life and died a happier person for it. But anyway, gang, this has been fun. I hope you enjoyed watching. And as I've stated, I'm going to be doing a lot of videos like this year in 2020 that connect individuals from cemeteries to buildings and other properties, talking to some of their descendants, and really just broadening the scope of what I'm doing out here in the world's cemeteries. So it's really been an honor. And with that, we will say, rest well, Whitemarsh MacFeeley. You serve the world well.